The headlines are a deliberate misdirection. Mass production of guided missiles in North Korea. Drone strikes in Russian border regions. This is the kinetic theater, the loud, visible threat designed to hold your attention. It is a liability, but not the primary vector. The mathematical certainty of systemic risk is not found in the explosion. It is found in the silence that precedes it. Analysts at RUSI and CSIS have mapped the true asymmetric vulnerability of a global power, not its military assets, but its data infrastructure. The objective is not to sink a carrier. The objective is to make the carrier deaf, dumb, and blind. A kinetic attack has a calculable cost and a predictable response. A coordinated attack on data infrastructure, severing undersea cables, blinding orbital satellites, removes the middle rungs of the escalation ladder. This protocol creates a far more dangerous strategic entity, the blind Leviathan. A superpower deprived of real-time intelligence cannot de-escalate. It loses discretionary control. It becomes a cornered animal operating not on data, but on doctrine. Its only remaining leverage is to execute pre-authorized launch-on-warning protocols. This isn't a failure of the system, it is a feature. The perceived weakness of the small actor becomes the accelerant for a global solvency crisis. This is the silent vector. The core motive is not a display of strength, but a declaration of bankruptcy. We are witnessing a global solvency crisis, where the balance sheets of major powers dictate military doctrine. When a nation-state can no longer afford the kinetic cost of conventional dominance, it behaves exactly like a cornered corporation facing liquidation. It takes extreme measures to avoid default. Consider the Russian Federation. Analysts at CSIS confirm the initial kinetic campaign proved financially and politically unsustainable. The war became a severe domestic liability. An extended high-cost conventional conflict drains state reserves and erodes public support, creating an internal solvency crisis that no regime can tolerate indefinitely. Victory through conventional means became prohibitively expensive. This weakness is then exploited. Asymmetric attacks, like the drone strikes hitting Russian border regions, serve as a constant, low-cost drain on a superpower's resources and morale. Each drone, costing thousands, forces a response costing millions in defensive hardware and political capital. This is not random. It is a calculated strategy to accelerate the adversary's solvency crisis. This forces a pivot. When a conventional victory is off the table due to cost, and you are simultaneously bleeding from 1,000 small cuts, your strategic calculus is stripped down to a binary choice. The middle rungs of the escalation ladder, the expensive, grinding conventional options, have been rendered obsolete. This is not a choice made from strength, but a mathematical function of weakness. Therefore, the only leverage remaining is to threaten what your opponent cannot counter. Russia's pivot toward nuclear posturing is not a sign of madness. It is the final, logical move in a solvency crisis. Unable to afford a win on the current battlefield, the state must change the battlefield itself. The perceived weakness of smaller actors, armed with cheap, precise weapons, becomes the primary vector forcing a superpower's hand toward catastrophic escalation. The entire strategic blueprint for modern warfare is facing a terminal solvency crisis. The math is not complex. According to analysis from the Royal United Services Institute, or RUSI, the kinetic cost exchange is now terminally inverted. A $5 million main battle tank can be permanently neutralized by a $500 first-person view drone. This is a 10,000 to 1 cost asymmetry. This is not a weapon, it is an economic vector. This catastrophic imbalance is what strategists refer to as the democratization of violence. The state's monopoly on industrial-scale force, once guaranteed by billion-dollar defense budgets and complex supply chains, has been liquidated. It is now accessible to smaller state and non-state actors. This is not a theoretical model. This is deployed protocol. State media from North Korea confirms the launch of serial production for a new generation of high-precision guided missiles. They are not building a handful for parades. They have initiated large-scale manufacturing. This is a calculated investment in asymmetric leverage against a conventional opponent. Simultaneously, active kinetic events validate the model. Reports confirm ongoing drone strikes inside Russian border regions, inflicting casualties and economic damage. The barrier to entry for cross-border attack has collapsed. A superpower's industrial heartland is no longer a fortress. It is now an exposed, sprawling, and undefendable attack surface. Every dollar of infrastructure becomes a potential liability. The regional instability you are being shown is not the crisis. It is the venue. These gray zones are not geopolitical accidents. They are engineered financial laboratories. Their primary function is to serve as a staging ground to test the solvency of a superpower. Each drone strike, each missile launch, is a transaction designed to calculate the precise kinetic cost required to bankrupt a global power. The blueprint is now public record. North Korea has initiated mass production of next-generation guided missiles. This is not for its own defense. According to state media, this is serial production for export to the highest bidder. Simultaneously, the efficacy of this model is demonstrated daily. Recent drone strikes in Russian border regions confirm the strategy. Low-cost asymmetric assets creating a disproportionately high-cost liability for a state actor. This proliferation has created a strategic trap. Superpower intervention, as conceptualized in the Donroe Doctrine, feared by smaller nations after the Venezuela incident, is now mathematically obsolete. The kinetic cost of neutralizing thousands of high-precision missiles exceeds the political and financial capital of any Western government. This isn't weakness, it's a feature. Analysts at CSIS document how these proxy zones are designed to bleed a superpower's treasury and political will, deliberately neutralizing conventional military options. The purpose of these laboratories is to refine the protocol for systemic collapse. Intelligence warnings of instability in nations like South Africa or even Canada are misdiagnosed as regional issues. They are symptoms. These are test beds for attrition warfare models, preparing for deployment within the core systems of the West. The vector is the perceived weakness of the proxy. The payload is not kinetic. It is a solvency crisis. The mathematical certainty is that when a superpower cannot afford to win, its only remaining protocol is to escalate. The nuclear commander does not see an incoming missile. He sees a blank screen. The radar, the satellites, the entire sensory apparatus. Gone. This is the fog of digital war. The directive is not to wait for confirmation. The directive is to launch. The protocol is known as launch on warning. Strategic analysts at RUSI define it as a policy to retaliate the moment an adversary's launch is detected before incoming warheads can destroy one's own arsenal. It is a cold mathematical response designed to guarantee a second strike. The system's logic is brutal. It is better to launch on a false alarm than to fail to launch on a real attack. This protocol was designed for a world that no longer exists. The proliferation of low-cost, high-precision weapons is the critical accelerant. State media confirms North Korea has begun mass production of next-gen guided missiles. Simultaneously, drone strikes now penetrate the border regions of nuclear powers. These are not isolated events. They are data points proving that conventional military superiority is being neutralized at a low kinetic cost. The systemic risk is the exploitation of this doctrine. An adversary no longer needs a multi-trillion-dollar bomber fleet. They need only execute a targeted cyber attack to blind the early warning network. To the commander in the bunker, a successful cyber attack is indistinguishable from a successful first strike that has destroyed his sensors. Fear is not the variable. The protocol is. Forced into an information vacuum, the commander must assume the worst. A launch becomes a mathematical certainty. This is the ultimate solvency crisis. When a superpower cannot afford a conventional victory, as analysts warn regarding the affordability of interventions from Venezuela to Ukraine, its kinetic options are removed. The only leverage remaining is the final rung on the escalation ladder. The perceived weakness of an actor armed with modern asymmetric tools has become the primary vector for triggering a superpower's most extreme protocols. The digital ghost is now the most likely trigger for global asset liquidation. The doctrine of overwhelming force is now a balance sheet liability. A superpower's aircraft carrier group, a $100 billion kinetic asset, can be held at risk by a $2 million swarm of high-precision missiles. The industrialization of this technology, confirmed by state media reports on North Korea's mass production of guided systems, has democratized the tools of strategic denial. This is not theory. The use of low-cost drones in active conflict zones, as documented in the Russian border regions, provides a live-fire blueprint for any actor facing a conventional military deficit. This shift creates a systemic risk. When smaller nations perceive a threat, such as the strategic framework dubbed the Don Roe Doctrine by analysts, their logical response is no longer appeasement. It is the acquisition of asymmetric deterrence. This removes the middle rungs of the escalation ladder. If a superpower cannot afford the political and economic cost of a conventional ground campaign, a scenario foreshadowed in analyses of potential Venezuela operations, its only remaining leverage is a direct escalation to protocols previously considered unthinkable. The first test of this new reality will not be a formal declaration of war. It will be a calibration shot. Within the next 12 months, expect a coordinated multi-vector strike against the primary power and data infrastructure of a critical Western logistics hub, likely the port of Los Angeles, Long Beach. The attack will utilize a swarm of autonomous drones launched from a stateless vessel, designed for maximum economic disruption and zero forensic attribution. RUSE and CSES models indicate such an event would halt 40% of U.S. inbound container traffic, triggering a national solvency crisis. It will not be an act of war. It will be a mathematical statement demonstrating that the cost of kinetic dominance is now infinite.